What is good, Foundation Nation, and welcome to yet another disc review. This one's going to be a review / comparison. We're going to be taking a look at the DGA Hypercane, which is their newest distance driver. It's supposed to be more like a more overstable Hurricane. I've thrown it once or twice. We've also done a 1/3 review on this, and we're going to be taking it in comparison to the Discraft Force, and also be looking at the Force individually as well. The Force is one of the older drivers in the game, but I think it's pretty underrated for how much it's being used right now. So we're going to go ahead and look at them a little more up close, get a good feel for both of them, see how they compare, and then obviously throw them in this wide open field on a few different lines and see how similar they really are, because they feel pretty similar in the hand. We'll see how similar they are out here in the open. So when I take a look at both the Force and the Hypercane, rim-wise and width-wise, they feel pretty similar in the hand. They have a pretty similar rim width. The biggest thing that I notice a difference of, we'll have to get a close-up shot of this, is like a B-roll shot, is the Hypercane seems to almost have like a outer rim bead. I've heard about this on a lot of other, it's more common on like end of a fairway drivers, but basically the outer edge kind of like curls back in. I think that affects the late speed stability, whereas the Force doesn't have that. Other than that, in the hand, they feel pretty similar. The rim shape looks pretty similar. I just noticed that rim bead, and I'm wondering how that's going to affect the late stability of it, or if it affects it at all. The plastic wise, I would say the plastic that the DGA Hypercane is in is pretty similar to like a TI plastic, maybe a little bit gummier. We didn't have any TI Forces, so I got an ESP one because feel-wise, this ESP feels pretty similar to the Hypercane plastic. So hopefully, flight-wise, that's going to be as close as they can get due to plastic, and so then we'll just see the true nature of their flight. The Force is brand new. The Hypercane's been thrown once in this field, but other than that, is brand new. So should give us a true, straight out of the box, what you're going to be getting if you were to pick these up today and give them a throw. So let's go ahead and start off by throwing them both just on a little bit of Hyzer. That's my natural release, and then we'll go from there on a lot of Hyzer, Anhyzer, flat, and forehand, and kind of talk through my comparison as we do that. Okay, so that actually had a lot more forward push than I expected. It didn't flip up at all. It definitely held true to its angle, but it didn't seem like it really wanted to get to the ground. I'm gonna be very interested to see if the Hypercane has that similar forward pushing style with this little bit of Hyzer, or if it wants to get to the ground a little bit faster and see which one's more overstable. I feel like I might have put that on a little bit more Hyzer, but flight-wise, glide-wise, and even distance-wise, they were like identical. I don't know if that came through on camera or not, but I feel like I just threw the exact same shot. I almost feel like I threw the exact same disc. So it'll be interesting once we throw them flat and on Anhyzer how they react. But a little bit of Hyzer, they seem like the same disc. They seem relatively overstable with a good amount of glide. All right, so these actually ended up literally within about 8 feet of each other. They were pretty much the same distance. I think the Hypercane was technically like a few feet shorter and a few feet farther left, but I think that was more how I threw it versus the flight path. So far, very similar. I'm gonna go with the Force again first here. I'm gonna keep throwing it in this direction, and I'm gonna rip on it as flat as I can. I struggle with the flat release, so don't be surprised if it comes out on a little bit of angle, but I'll try to tell you what angle it comes out on in case it's not obvious, but I'm gonna attempt both on a flat release. All right, I did put a tiny bit of Anhyzer on it. It was low, but that thing really wanted to stay in the air, and it just held dead straight. I mean, when I say a little bit of Anhyzer, I'm talking the tiniest amount. I threw that, for me, that was about as flat as I'll ever release a disc. It did have a little bit of turn. I think that was because the baby Anhyzer I put on it, but it just went dead straight, stayed up in the air, because I didn't give it a lot of height, stayed up in the air, and then had a very forward pushing finish to the left. It kind of like, instead of dumping, when I say forward pushing fade, people always make fun of me. I mean, it's not dumping, it's like pushing as it fades. So I really like that for distance. I'm gonna rethrow this Force. I turfed it. I'm gonna rethrow it and see if it's a similar flight path. Just try to hit it as flat as that one. All right, we're gonna take the Force, try to hit it flat. I should mention, I forgot to mention it before the Hypercane, it is a slight headwind. I don't think it's enough to really affect these discs, but thought I would mention that just because it is a a slight one. It actually just stopped, but when I threw the first one, it was maybe a 5 mile an hour at most headwind. Okay, got it a little bit more height, felt like a similar release, and honestly a pretty similar result. I think it got farther left just because it was a little more nose up and a little bit higher. They do feel very similar. Right now, I'm gonna say that the Hypercane is slightly less stable, it seems like to me. It seems like it wants to stay in the air a little bit longer and it wants to kind of hold straighter. That could be from the rim bead. That could technically be from that, since that's the main difference I've noticed. But we'll see on Anhyzer. That'll really tell us the full story. But from the 2 throws so far, I think the Hypercane just has a little bit more glide and a little bit more tendency to want to stay forward, whereas the Force wants to kind of get left and get to the ground. It doesn't have as much of that forward pushing fade. But we're going to throw it back on Anhyzer, and then we're going to try it on a little bit more of a spike Hyzer angle, and then we'll throw forehand, and then I'll give you my final thoughts on it. So now we're going to go Anhyzer, try to give it a little bit more height. This is probably going to be the most telling flight for these because they are a little bit more overstable. So putting them on Anhyzer will really tell us how much they hold over. I'm going to try to get the same height and the same amount of angle so we can really look at the difference between the two, because that'll tell us a lot about how long it takes them in the flight before they come out. I didn't quite give it height to where it didn't get to fight out. You could tell it was starting to pan. I might have to hit that one a second time. It'll depend on what this shot does. If I get this shot the right amount of height, I definitely want to throw that one again. That one I gave height, but not quite enough angle. I think those, we'll leave these in so you can see them, but they're not good. They're good shots to show the disc. They're not good shots to show the disc to each other. What that kind of told me is that I need to practice my shots, because that didn't tell me anything between the two. That shows me that neither of them are extremely overstable, like PD2 Max, Nuke OS type overstable, but it doesn't tell me much compared to each other. So I'm gonna go grab them and we're gonna throw them again, and then we'll do the forehand and the Hyzer. We're gonna make sure we give it height and we hit it hard. Give it height and hit it hard. It's the life motto of a distance thrower. That's a much better shot. That's a much better shot. Okay, so that way, I mean, I cranked over on it. I gave it a decent amount of Anhyzer. It definitely fought back. Not as overstable as I expected a Force to be, is what I'm learning so far. Could be just that run, because I've thrown some Forces that are ridiculously overstable, but pretty promising. To be honest with you, that kind of flew like a destroyer. That almost was identical to how my destroyers fly. So now let's see this Hypercane. Try to get on that same angle, hopefully achieve the same flight. Oh, I think he's done it. I think they're the same disc. I know they're not, especially like I know the rim bead's there, but I feel like a crazy person trying to decipher the difference between those two flights and every other flight beforehand. They're so similar. I think it's just gonna come down to hand feel and plastic preference, but they're both even made by Discraft. So what am I even saying there? Let's go forehand and Hyzer, and then we'll capture what's going on in my brain, because I don't know yet. I'm gonna go with the Hyzer now. There's a pretty intimidating lacrosse team coming up behind me. I think it's like 13-year-old boys. They might beat me up. All right, we're going Hyzer. Okay, pretty pushing. We'll throw this one on a high Hyzer as well, then throw the forehand back. First off, I think that disc just burnt my hand because it was baking in the sun. Again, I feel like I'm throwing the same disc.
Yeah, same thing.
So we'll go forehand. Maybe that'll tell us something. Update on the lacrosse team. They have overtaken where my wallet and keys are located and are now proceeding to come onto the field. So Connor and I might not make it out of here, and there's a solid chance that I just spent an obscene amount of money on Amazon with my credit cards. But we're gonna throw these forehands and we're gonna tell you how these discs fly, because that's what we're committed to do. A little bit of Anhyzer, and as expected, flexed out. All right, last throw of the video. Force. Try to hit that same line. Okay. We'll walk down there and I'll tell you what I think. All right, so final thoughts on the Force and the Hypercane. I think they're a very similar disc. I think if you have one, you don't really need to have the other. But if you have neither, I think picking up one or the other is a great choice because it's a very consistent, overstable driver. I would trust these on Hyzer in a headwind. I think it might flip them up a little bit, but they seem to be pretty far flying discs. They both wanted to stay in the air, have a very consistent finish. Both of them reacted well to Anhyzer, Hyzer, everything, and they went a long ways. They both flew very fast. Hopefully it didn't come across as negative that I thought they were about the same disc because I love the Force. And so the Hypercane, I'm singing its praises when I'm saying it's pretty much a Force. But yeah, I do think that they're very close to the same disc. There's a little bit of differences that you might notice here and there, but they would definitely overlap if you're trying to bag both. This could also be a rare case where I have a flippy Force and an overstable Hypercane or something along those lines, because this is not as overstable of a Force as I've ever had. I haven't had enough experience with the Hypercane to know how it adjusts, if there are less stable ones or more stable ones out there, but they are very similar discs. If you want to pick either of them up, they're both available right now on foundationdisc.com. Link is our description below. I really like the feel of this plastic. I called it TI, but I don't think it is. I don't really know what it technically is. Like in the Discraft lineup, I would imagine that it's not really a Discraft plastic. I think it's their like SP plastic. Feels a little bit gummier than TI. Part of that is because we're in the sun and it feels like a little bit grippier. Not as stiff and a little grippier than TI, but it has that same sheen type finish to it. So really enjoyed doing this review. Let us know in the comments down below what disc you want us to review next time. And other than that, we'll see you in the next one.